All right, that was foolish of me because I stopped. There's a pause button. Okay, so there's just going to be 2 videos for this. Age participation. The older you are, the more likely you are to vote, because the older you are, the more you realize your vote matters, your vote counts. For the longest time now, basically for as long as I've been like aware of the idea of voting, the concept has always been like get out the young people to vote. Like MTV used to do the whole rock the vote thing, trying to get out, trying to increase voter turnout amongst young people. And Democrats specifically really need that. Democrats need young people to vote, right? Yay, young people for Bernie. These are just some graphics for voter turnout, and I'll let you look at those on your own because I can't even read them from here. Race. So again, you go back and you look historically, and I don't care that much about history because this really isn't a history class. But you should know that black people have at times historically had their voting rights suppressed. But even since their voting rights haven't been suppressed, like I said, minorities are less likely to vote than their white counterparts. Right now, you did have some significant increases in black voter turnout as a result of Obama's candidacy, so 2008 and 2012. But we saw that sort of revert back in 2016, and black people didn't go out and vote, right? Latinos are sometimes referred to as the sleeping giant because they're becoming a larger and larger and larger subset of the U.S. population. But again, they have very low levels of voter turnout. And again, it's another thing where Democrats are trying to mobilize them. Like the reality is that if you look at the data on how many Republicans versus Democrats there are in the country, Democrats would win like every national election every time, always, forever and ever, amen, if everybody voted, because there's more Democrats than there are Republicans. But the Democrats don't vote. With Latinos, one of the exceptions though is the Cuban Americans. Cubans, they don't vote. They don't vote Democrat, like period. Right? No, they really don't. Because you understand, like Cuba's communist, right? And so the Cubans that live in the United States, people of Cuban heritage living in the United States, are political refugees. They fled Cuba because they hated communism. And they see the Democratic Party as like steps toward communism. Because it possibly is. Right? I mean, Bernie's running around calling himself a democratic socialist. Well, socialism and communism are essentially the same thing. Okay? Asian Americans, they have relatively low voter turnout. They are historically, they've actually been more conservative. But their turnout, and they make up a small enough portion of the United States that they don't have a huge impact in elections, right? Used to be that men voted at a higher rate than women. That's beginning to shift. Women are actually now, in some instances and in some places, actually more likely than men to vote. When it comes to parties, men are more likely to vote Republican, women are more likely to vote Democrat, right? Religious identity can impact it. So when you look at like black churches, obviously black churches had a huge role in the civil rights movement, and so black churches actually sort of promote civic responsibility and voting and things of that nature. What we refer to sometimes as like the Christian Coalition or the Religious Right or the Moral Majority, it has all those different names, but that's become a sort of predominant political force for the Republican Party these days, right? And that was really sort of with the rise of Reagan. Okay. The political environment, again, the political environment can affect voting. So essentially, how mobilized are we? Like, how active are we? How much do we think that this election is really essential? But if you're trying to mobilize, it really has to be done sort of on the ground, face to face. Again, like, I don't know. Do y'all ever get text messages from people like asking who you're gonna vote for?
Oh my
Like
God.
my wife and I get them all the time, and I
That's
love it.
funny.
I love just messing with people. Like I'll just text back and be like, I'm gonna vote Biden, right? And then the next time somebody like votes, right? And specifically because I love messing with their internal numbers, right? Like when somebody from the Biden campaign is like, who you gonna vote for? I'm like, I'm gonna vote Biden. And then when somebody from the Trump campaign is like, can we count on your vote for Trump? Yes, you can. Like I just lie to them. I don't care.
Bro, it's like the random, and then I give you this long paragraph.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It doesn't really work in terms of mobilization, right? Yeah, it provides some internal numbers for them, but if we're learning anything about like polling numbers, good lord, polls are so inaccurate these days, right? According to polls in 2016, Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump like she was going to beat him like a drum, to quote Joe Biden. That's what Joe Biden said. He's going to beat Donald like a drum.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, so this is that data analytics that we were just talking about, right? Like them texting you or emailing you or calling you and asking like who you want to vote for and whatnot. I don't put a lot of stock into the answers of this anymore. The Electoral College is actually really important in terms of understanding voting. Oh, this is electoral competition, not electoral college. We'll get to the no, there it is. It is on the bottom. Okay. So competition. We'll go to competition first. Sadly, there's not a lot of competition, especially in the House of Representatives. There's not a lot of competition in Senate races either, right? Like California, for instance. I don't know if there's a senator from California on the ballot this year or not. But California, because it's so liberal, right? There's so many Democrats in California that the way the state runs their elections, the top two candidates from the primaries, just top two candidates from any of the primaries, go into the general election in November. And so generally what you see is like Democrat v. Democrat in California. Like no Republican is ever going to become a senator from California anytime soon. Okay. In the House of Representatives, though, you do have something called gerrymandering, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail when we get to Congress itself. But basically, gerrymandering is drawing some political districts where you ensure that one party or the other is going to win. The Electoral College is important for you to understand in terms of competition because obviously, or hopefully you realize, maybe it's not obvious, hopefully you realize that the presidential election is not a popular vote. Right? Hillary won the popular vote. What the Electoral College does, though, is it basically makes like 7 states super important. Like super important. And then every other state, like nobody cares about. Like nobody goes in campaigns in Wyoming. Like period. Because 1, Wyoming's always going to vote Republican, and 2, it's only a measly, piddly little 3 Electoral College votes. But by the same token, like, Republicans don't go and campaign in New York, because you ain't going to win New York. You ain't going to win New York City. Like, you're just not. So it's a waste of your time, and those 29 votes are just going to go to the Democrats every time. Instead, we go and campaign in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, maybe Colorado. Like, that's it. Like, those are the states that matter. If you live anywhere else, your vote for President of the United States don't matter. It does. It matters. But I mean, it doesn't. Like, it's not, like, it matters. Because I'm telling y'all, like, especially the 3 of you that are 18, like, please, for the love of Jesus, go vote. But the reality is this state's going Republican. Like, Donald Trump going to win Texas. I guarantee it.
Oh, that's not even a question. Like,
guarantee it.
you
right?
can put money on that one.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Biden is going to win California. I guarantee it. Your vote in those 2 states doesn't really matter. Right? But you should vote anyways because down ballot stuff does matter. States, again, they have their own electoral laws because states are in charge of voting. Right? So they can change requirements. Like, for instance, in some states, if you have ever been convicted of a felony, you lose your voting rights. In other states, you can actually vote while in prison. Right? Like, you can cast an absentee ballot in prison. In other states, like, you go to prison for 5 years and then you get out, and then you're not even on probation, like you have paid your debt to society and you are a regular citizen again, you can never vote again, right? Voter ID laws, some states have voter ID laws. Generally, Republican states have voter ID laws because Republican states keep running their mouths about like voter fraud and whatnot. Voter fraud is not a real thing, right? I mean, it is, but it's not. There was a study in 2012, I think, in South Carolina. Like, South Carolina's got 6 million people, right? There was well over 1 million votes cast for President of the United States. You know how many instances of voter fraud they found in South Carolina? Over 1 million votes. 7 instances of voter fraud. Not a big deal, right? But IDs can't help with that. Democrats think that IDs are just voter suppression because poor people can't afford to get an ID. I don't really know, like, I don't know about all that. But, yeah. Some other barriers, we just talked about this, like felons, where they can and can't vote. Again, right, so if they're on probation or parole, they can't vote. 13 states, they lose voting rights forever. Like, forever. And so here's the thing, if you're ever convicted of a crime, like, you need to make sure that you know your voting rights, right? And if you live in a place like Florida, like, I'm pretty sure Florida is one of those states that you can't ever vote again, like, leave. Voting is supposed to be convenient. Usually there's polling places everywhere, right? Like, there's just one, like, down the street from my house. Some ideas for reform, right? Same-day registration. I think the only state that has same-day registration is it's one of the Dakotas, maybe South Dakota, I think. But that's an idea on how to try to increase voter turnout. Because like I just told Kaylee a minute ago, like, you need to register now because you have to be registered in the state of Texas 30 days before the election, right? So a lot of people don't know that. If she had missed that window, she wouldn't be able to vote, right? Permanent absentee ballots. There's some people that want to see this. This is the idea of voting by mail. This is really controversial right now because Trump keeps talking about how that's going to lead to voter fraud. And then we've seen early voting. We've seen a significant rise in early voting in the United States. So Texas early voting begins, I believe, like October 13th maybe, and I think it runs through the 31st. But you can go to a handful of different voting locations. I know the Rosenberg Annex, which is a part of the Fort Bend County government, you can go and early vote there even on like a Saturday. And so it really is supposed to help increase voter turnout, right? These are just some graphics. I'll let you look through these on your own in terms of who can vote and what some of the requirements are and whatnot. And I think that's it. Is this the end? Yeah, because those polls I don't care about. Yeah, we're good. I got through all of that with a little bit of time to spare. Now unfortunately, because I stopped the video instead of paused it, it's going to be 2 videos in D2L, but whatever.